All right, hello everyone. Welcome back to the Gumtree of Liberty podcast. I'm your host Stuart, and I'm joined today by my co-host CentristOzzy and returning guest Secedes McRae. Good to have you back on. It's been a long time.
Yes, hey guys. How are you? Good feedback.
Good to finally meet
And I'm
you.
glad to finally have a working introduction properly. I'm glad that's finally working for us. It's been a long time, but we are more professional now. We have an introduction. We have a title card. It's all working well finally. It's been a
Slow
few
and
months,
steady,
but
mate.
there.
Slow and steady. Like I said, we'll get
We're big kids now. We did it.
there.
We
We
made
did
it.
it. We made it, Mom. Look at us. That's so awesome. No, congratulations. The intro is beautiful. I'm going to assume that's some sort of wonderful Aboriginal freedom drum or something. And it's wonderful.
I wanted to get it started today by asking you, Centrist, about your life in prison in 2 days'
Yeah,
time.
not yet. So in 2 days' time, the lockouts for the unvaccinated start. So that's myself and a few other people that I know. So some people, I'm just trying to find the graphic for you. I should have been a lot more organized, but certain places, like, you're not allowed to go to the bottle shop. You're allowed to go to the food shop, but not the bottle shop. So if you, if you go into Audi, I don't know if do you have Audi in the States?
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
like
yeah.
yeah. So you know how they have the alcohol section. You can go and buy groceries in Audi, but if you buy alcohol, you have to prove that you're vaccinated. So, because of science. Which is interesting. So obviously that's not it's purely a punishment type thing for people. Not that it really bothers me at the end of the day, but like it's definitely not something that's necessarily a health protocol. I've been trying to find the graphic because it's got a whole list of where you can and cannot go. And I'm just trying to. Oh, here we go. Got it. I'll see if I can send it to you so you can put it up. See if it works in here. Nope. Oh, maybe not. I'll see if I can get it up and we can share it. Hang on. Sorry, guys. I should have been a bit more organized. I apologize.
That's okay.
All right.
We're getting there. Technology is
We got
always
an
fun.
intro. We have,
Yeah.
look at us. No, man, hey, we're going to get this. It's cool. Take your time.
Okay. So that all this stuff sort of kicks in on the on the 1st of
February
Feb,
1st.
Yep, February 1st. Places you can and can't go are places like the pub. You're not allowed to visit sick people in the hospital. So you can go to the hospital, but you cannot go and visit someone who is in the hospital. So for someone like me, my dad is a high risk category. So if he was to get sick and go to the hospital, I would not be allowed to go and see him if he was in there, which is a bit of a cunt thing to do, to be honest. But I'm just gonna see if I can share.
Okay, so you said sick. So
Yeah.
what if you're in there?
If you get
have a
sick,
baby?
you can go to the hospital. Yeah. But if you so for example, if you're saying the baby thing, if you're not vaccinated, your wife was in there having the baby, you can go to the hospital.
Okay. So that's okay. But if you want to go see your dad, who's not feeling well,
Yeah, I wouldn't be allowed to go. No.
okay, what if you're in the hospital because you broke yourself or burnt half your
Well,
body in a car
if
accident?
you're admitted to the hospital, you can go. You can be in the hospital, but you can't be a visitor to the hospital without being proof of vaccination.
Okay. I'm gonna marinate on that for a second because
And to make it even worse, they're currently considering, last I heard, to prevent parents from seeing children in hospital without a medical exemption.
You cannot go and see your. Well, you've got to apply for exemptions, although I don't know how that will go. If your child is in the children's ward or whatever and you're not vaccinated, you won't be allowed to go in.
And of course, that exemption goes through the government, and we know how efficient the government is at this sort of stuff.
Oh, yeah. We know how great they are because they've been doing
They're
such
in
a
hurry to give
job.
you an exemption.
Oh, yeah.
So if your child's in an emergency, you can't go see them. You could be like waiting a couple of days to get it, especially if it's like on a weekend, because the government only does the 9 to 5 during the week, during the working week. So if your kid gets injured on the weekend and has to go into emergency, you can't see him for like 2 days.
Yeah, it's
So you couldn't bring, if you were unvaccinated, you couldn't bring your child. You would have to find someone who's vaccinated to bring them to the hospital?
Probably, yeah.
Yes, yeah, technically, yes.
So, like,
I don't know. They've obviously put
couldn't-
these rules in place, but whether or not they've thought that
Right.
far through it, I seriously doubt.
I'm just
But,
thinking, like, okay, well, like, if your significant other is at work or whatever, and your kid, like, swallows a Lego or some shit, right? And then you're like, I gotta get this out of you, kid. And then you're like, wait, I can't because I'm not vaccinated. And then, wait a minute, what is the now Australian definition of vaccinated? Because in the time that I've known you guys, that has changed, I think, half a dozen times, if not more, depending on the state we're talking about.
So in Sydney, they've changed the definition away from saying fully vaccinated to up to date, and to have 3 shots. Like CHO did a press conference, I believe it was today in Sydney. The CHO said,
Yeah, it was
3 shots to be up to date, and if you're immune compromised, it's 4 shots.
Yes.
Yeah, they're following the Israel model, which isn't working, but pretty much like that. They've basically done it step for step, except for they didn't do the passports as fast as what Israel did. Israel had them all pretty much from the start, which was interesting. It's not something I would have thought coming from that country, but here we are. So, Stuart, I have sent you that photo because I am I'm not a boomer, but I'm getting close, and I couldn't figure out how to share it. Yeah.
Sure, I'll try and find that.
Yeah, I just sent it to you on Messenger, so you can put it up for us.
Sure, give me one
Sorry
moment.
about that. I'm hopeless. I'm hopeless at this stuff. What was
Okay, so
the other thing
is it up to 4? Is it up to 4 shots now? Is that where they're? Is that where we're at?
Immune compromised in Sydney, yes. Melbourne is currently changing the definition of two fully vaxxed being 3 shots, I believe. WA, we locked it down. Again, we shut our opening borders because I don't know where he got this data from, but he reckons that the 3rd shot is like 80-something% effective against Omicron, which we know isn't true. I don't think I've ever seen that information. Like, it's not even one of those you debated. It's like I've never heard it.
Right.
So he didn't release the border opening because he wants everyone to have their 3rd shot. And so that's where he's pushing for that before we open, which I think we'll get to March, and that's when Pfizer reckon they're going to release their Omicron specific vaccine, and then we won't open again because then we'll need that one.
Okay, right. So then, okay, so when's the Tau, like TAU, when's the Tau variant? So it goes to Omicron, Phi.
We've got
There's no son of Omicron.
Yeah, son of Omicron.
Oh God.
And there was also Florona.
Modelling for Western Australia was originally to open the border on February 5th, and that modelling was based off of Delta. Now this Omicron, WA says they're 6 months behind the East Coast, and so therefore the border is staying closed to apparently become one of the only places in the world where they've got a high rate of triple vaccination before you get hit by Omicron.
Well, we've got
so they are trying to get everyone.
Yeah.
Yes, but they're trying to get everyone. That his attempt is his approach is to get everyone triple vaxxed and then open up. But the problem is when I got son of Omicron, which is a new variant, so the model's going to be wrong again, and I'll keep postponing it because WA's historically had a very, very hard border during COVID for the last almost 2 years. Queensland had their 2-year anniversary of COVID. You see the days. So we're going on 2 years now, and there's still a hard border in Western Australia.
Yeah, we the problem, I think, which I think leans towards why we even started the podcast and what we were doing in terms of liberty in Australia, is because I'm pretty certain nearly every single Australian was on board shutting the borders hard at the start. A lot of that's because of our native communities, which you would have seen in Northern Territory and stuff, for the same reason that the government was saying this is why we had to transfer these people to the camps. We were like, well, let's shut the borders because we don't know what COVID's going to do. COVID could completely decimate, and you do not want to see a nation of people wiped out, right? It's just like, it would just be irresponsible to do that without having more knowledge. And so that's why WA's border went really hard as well, is because we have a lot of remote communities up in the north part of our state, and we were all cool with the lockdown border because it left us to be, we didn't really have a full lockdown. We've basically been working and everything normal for 2 years. This is the border's just been shut, so you couldn't go in and out. So you could go to work, you could go to the pub, you could go to footy games, you could do all that sort of stuff. So it's easier for the people to just be like, well, yeah, it's not so bad if we just leave it shut. But eventually it's going to open. So, and the longer he takes to do it, I think the more it's going to hurt. I think it needs to be like the Band-Aid treatment where it's going to come. You're not going to stop it. And Omicron was your perfect opportunity in the middle of summer to be able to bring it in. And yeah, you just botched it. So we'll see what happens. But at the end of the day, it doesn't bother me because I'm not doing anything or going anywhere anyway. But yeah, if you have a look at the chart, so the hospital and aged care visitors, aged care is not unnormal. They usually have a flu vaccine entry requirement anyway, but it's not mandatory. So like sometimes you can go, sometimes you can't. Some aged cares are different. So it's not uncommon.
It depends on private. I think public has a mandate for flu vaccines. Private could, I know from memory, changes from company to company.
And it's also not as strictly enforced as what we're seeing now either. It's not like, I remember going to visit Nana in the aged care and never had any asked for proof of vaccination or anything. They just went, oh, have you been vaccinated? Oh yeah, sure. But yeah, so now drinking, dining, hospitality, basically all taken away. Amusement parks, theatres, cinemas, music festivals and major events over 500 people. I'm too old to be going to those anyway, so it's all good. This is a good one. The gyms, fitness centres and health studios.
But you can buy fast food.
We're worried about your health,
but you're not allowed to go to the gym. No problem. No problem.
We can't go to the casino, which, well, shit happens. This one hurts, the footy stadium. I'm a mad football supporter and I'm still hanging on my principles, and it's going to hurt not being able to go watch the footy. Actually, from my team, one of the players has actually stood down from the team because he won't get the mandate. They won't do the vaccine. So make it out of what you will. Yep, some are leading the way, which is good. You can't take the kids to the play centres. Can't go into the bottle shops. Can't go into the nightclubs and the live music events without proof of vaccination. So basically, they're taking all the fun things away from you until you bend the knee and get vaccinated.
They're copying the others because we've already had that in Queensland. It's the exact same thing in every state, basically, for your vaccination requirements. Except, I think in Queensland, from memory, all outdoor events and indoor events you can't go to. So whereas WA has that 500-person cap, I think it's complete in Queensland. You can't go to any entertainment event of any sort at all. Any festival or anything like that.
Yeah, it's next level insane. But
and your border's closed.
It's not. So our borders haven't been closed. They've been controlled. Basically, they whenever there's been an outbreak over the east, they put a red zone up and you can't come whenever there's a high outbreak number. But people have been able to come in and out. And it depends on who you are. Like, it's been a rort from the start because Twiggy Forrest, who's a mining magnate, I don't know if you know who he is. Stokes have been able to fly in and out and do whatever they want, skip quarantine and all that sort of jazz because they've got private jets and stuff. I think Isla Fisher was able to come back to WA while there's Sacha Baron Cohen with him. I was just like, what are you doing? Like, there's families who can't get home. Like, they've been stuck there for 3 weeks, and you're gonna let these celebrities through. I'm just like, and people get angry at the wrong people. They're all worked up. That's why you saw all this hate towards Djokovic, because everyone's like, why should he get special treatment? But it's not him that's making the problem. Yeah, the government's the problem. So
I'm here to tell you, if I can get the special treatment, I'm taking it.
Yeah.
Well,
he did what he did. He made it work for him.
So okay. So if you wanted to go to Sydney, so I'm thinking, so you're in the West. So if your borders aren't closed, like you say, okay. So if you wanted to go to a place in Sydney, you'd have to have proof of vaccination.
It depends. Now, I'm not 100% certain on what Sydney's entry requirements are, because obviously I'm in WA and I haven't thought about traveling.
Right.
I believe I can get out, no worries. I would not be allowed back in for certain, so I wouldn't be able to come home. The only way to come home, I think, is to fly then from Sydney overseas and fly back in direct to WA, because I think unvaccinated people can fly in federally and land. Yeah, I know.
You have to quarantine though.
Yeah. But that's that's how you can get back into the state technically without being vaccinated. It's all of it is just ludicrous.
Okay. I'm just asking because, there are certain stadiums, we're talking about footy, American football, where there's certain stadiums that will probably require it. Seattle is one of them. Probably Toronto is one of them. And I'm a big basketball fan. I love basketball. So the Raptors, they've been having hell, because they come back and forth. And I'm sure like New York, New Jersey, there'll be places where the Jets to be able to, and that may happen. They haven't done it yet. They haven't done it this season. There's a lot of football fans who would easily say, you know what, if I never get to get out into the cold again to go watch a football game, that'd be fine. I'll just sit in my living room and eat my food, and it's cool. I, like you, love live sporting events. I just actually a few weeks ago I went to the LSU basketball game, and I didn't have to do anything, but I realized that you said music, right? And I'm a big live music person. Probably tickets to any live music event whatsoever, local, big, doesn't matter. That's my favorite thing in the world, and that has been a thing, and I've had to I've had to work to get around it. I'll tell you that. Had to figure out a way to get it. Now, thankfully, we don't have QR codes yet. We don't our vaccination is not connected to us digitally yet.
Yeah.
So
yet.
That is, you heard me. I have flown from here to Mexico and back. I was able to get around it.
Texas is always, is that where you are in Texas?
I will be. I'm 3 weeks away.
Texas has been open to Mexico a lot. Like, I've got friends who live there, and they were like, while we were in the middle of everything being locked down, he was flying to Mexico for a holiday. I was like, what the hell's going on? So
they can't go without the tourism dollars.
Yep.
Frankly. And so when the cruise ships got shut down, and so you could no longer cruise from Galveston, Texas to Cozumel or Cancun, Playa del Carmen, any of those places along the coast, that was huge. That was huge for them. And those tourism dollars are what pay the federale to make sure that no bad juju happens around tourist areas, because they need that. So when that ended, that's when we started to see an influx of cartels just showing up on the beaches of what used to be private beaches because they weren't getting paid. And basically, that's what it boiled down to. They are paid to not go over there, and then they couldn't pay for them anymore because the tourism dollars went down. So all you had to do to get in, I didn't have to do anything to get in, to get out, to come back to America. I had to have a COVID test, which in Mexico now they charge 35 US dollars, which is a couple hundred pesos. And I said, you can, no. So having a friend who has an actual, vaccine test or a COVID test, right, negative. He photoshopped that shit, and I got back into America, no problem. Because I wasn't gonna spend. I was like $800 for a freaking 800 pesos for a freaking test. No, I spent all that on margaritas, man. No. So, but my point is like, I have been able to finagle being able to go places and stuff. But so do you guys still have the QR codes? Like, is that still like is that part of it?
We have had the QR codes from the start. We had for tracking and tracing, which again, like most people, we were all aboard on because obviously we wanted to, it seemed logical. It's a little thing you can do to help, try and make sure everything was good. But then our police officers misused the data and said they would do it again, even though they weren't supposed to. And I was like, there goes the phone. I just got rid of it. I was like, I haven't used it since, which is probably going to get me in a lot of trouble eventually. But I haven't touched the login stuff. But now that is all.
Camps are really nice.
Oh yeah, ours isn't finished. I'm waiting.
I remember according to Claire, they're full of hot models.
That go there.
Yeah. But luckily, the government, both federal and state, are involved in building our ones here in WA. So it's going to take us a couple of years. So
there you go. Yeah.
Well, the camp where I am opens next month.
I know. Fun. Yeah, and you get two, don't you?
Are there going to be a lot of hot girls?
Yes, we get one where I am and one in Brisbane. So there's two in Queensland. One state, one state, one federal. So they both have one, and we still don't know the costs of the one near me. The Liberal Party, the opposition here, have been pushing for, working out the costs and the long-term uses, because the deputy leader of the LNP in my state, because it's in WA, it's the Liberals and Nationals are two separate parties. In Queensland, they're the same party. So the deputy leader is in my seat, and we're like one seat away from where the camp is. I'm pretty sure it's out of our electorate. Anyway, he's been pushing a lot to find out the figures, and they aren't saying what the figures are. And in fact, it was behind on construction, but they finally built it, and then so it's launching next month. Very exciting.
Yeah.
And I think the Brisbane one, which is already launched, I'm pretty sure, they said they might not use that for COVID. So they built it for COVID, and they said they might not use it. They said they might not need it, but we'll keep it there for refugees and natural disasters.
Yeah.
See y'all there.
Yeah. Yep. It's
Now, okay, so it's like gonna be like JFK, and they're not gonna release this information till 60 years.
They've done it. They've done it very clever as well, because the deal that has been done with the state governments, because at the moment the states, especially Queensland, WA, Victoria, who are the main ones, who are their Labor, and the federal government is Liberal. So the deal that they struck up was that the Liberal government would pay for all the materials, and the construction and running of the facility was to be done by the states. So it's an easy way to try and hide stuff, because I'm pretty sure that's what the deal was. It was that the Wellcamp one near me is pretty sure state funded. Yeah, but I think you'll find that the feds. Yeah, I think you'll find that the feds paid for product and material. They put money in for it because Scott Morrison refused to pay for it, which is why the government then went ahead and made it. Because there was a fallout between Scott Morrison and Palaszczuk. And so Palaszczuk announced hers on Thursday. And then on Friday, the federal government announced they were going to have one as well.
That's why we have two camps in Queensland, because there was that fallout between Palaszczuk and ScoMo. The one in Wellcamp, the one in Brisbane is going to be state run, federal funded. The one in Wellcamp is, I'm pretty sure, state run, state funded. Which is why they're being pushed to release the data, but they're not going to release their data because they've got no reason to. And the election's not for almost 3 years for the state. At the federal level, you've got the election which has to be held before the end of May. So everything that's happening between the state and federal governments, between the Labor premiers and the Liberal Prime Minister, is entirely political.
Okay, right.
All this stuff we're seeing is about politics. It's about winning votes, because the federal government has a 1-seat majority.
Mm-hmm.
It's 151 seats federally. Okay. The Speaker is one, and then there's 75 seats that are Liberal. So they've got a 1-seat majority. So if they lose 1 seat, it's a minority government. So everything's political to try and dislodge them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's what it's all been about, especially in Queensland, where a lot of the most marginal seats are. Mm. So all the stuff we're seeing about the COVID camps, in my opinion, and as I keep saying to people, is all about winning the election. Because the reason why the state government built theirs out here is it's a Liberal stronghold. The government knows they can't flip where we are, but we're only 1 seat federally. So at a state level, there's 3 seats here. At a federal level, it's just the 1 seat. So they know they can't flip us because we're a conservative stronghold, so conservative that we voted against gay marriage. We're basically the Bible Belt of Australia.
Crazies.
Cute.
And so the state government knows that if they can build the camp here, they can win votes on the coast for Labor and flip marginal seats there. And they know that there's no chance of flipping here, so they don't care. So it's all about politics, which is fun and games for the election. I say we only have a 6-week election campaign, but there's a lot of stuff that goes on beforehand that isn't technically part of the election campaign, that still is campaigning for votes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Anthony Albanese, the Labor leader federally, has just done a guerrilla campaign in Queensland and I want to say Victoria, I could be wrong, but Queensland and another state, and he's just claimed $17,000 in taxpayer money for accommodation. $17,000. Yeah, he didn't even leave his apartment. He ran the campaign, but didn't leave his apartment, and now he's claimed $17,000.
Yeah, they're all corrupt.
I think that came out yesterday. I could be wrong there, but yeah, he's claimed.
He's also to hear his praise. Sorry, go.
No, I was going to say I'm quite sure I saw that yesterday too, Stuart. That's what I was going to say. I saw that on the news. Yeah.
Yeah. Labor leader Anthony Albanese charged taxpayers $17,269 to stay in his own Canberra flat.
It's a fucking nice racket, isn't it? It's a nice racket, these guys. Bloody hell.
Oh, it's so good. I'm jealous.
Can you imagine how much wastage is in politicians? Like, you imagine how much taxpayer dollars we pay, and then how much wastage there is. It's just insane. But
do y'all's legislatures, and it's a little bit off topic, but do y'all's legislatures, or like your federal, legislature, your federal, like what would be our
Parliament?
Parliament. Thank you. The one. So how do they? I know their salaries are astronomical. I looked those up like day one when I was looking at Australian politics. They're insane. They're absolutely insane. So how is that determined? How is that number?
So it's an independent body that gives them pay rises.
Oh well,
no, they vote for pay rises.
Okay,
they vote for the pay rises.
But it's not the politicians who give it to them. It needs to be approved by that independent body.
Yes. It needs to be approved by the independent body, and then they vote for it.
Lots of these quotations.
They've given themselves pay rises.
Yeah.
They gave themselves pay rises during COVID.
That's disgusting.
This is actually, you should use this when especially if the LP are going to go up against Andrew Yang, who's going to probably steal a few votes off the Democrat side,
Yes.
would be one of his things is about paying politicians more. And I'm like, just got to show them that it doesn't work. It's the same shit. It's just more and more corruption is all you get. It's
I came up in college with an equation to pay Congress people, and it was kind of Friedman, so it was kind of like Friedman based, but basically it was a whole equation, but it was based on the GDP of your district.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
you could, so which is, like I said, which is very Friedman. It's very Milton Friedman. He didn't have a lot of great ideas, but that idea I always thought was brilliant. Like,
I think that's. Sorry, I was going to say, yeah, absolutely. I think, on the money. The media, I think that's been discussed a lot here too about using the average median income so the middle class basically dictates their pay rise. You can still give the politicians the perks of the travel and the accommodation and stuff when they are going and doing stuff. But if they want to get paid big bucks, they've got to start looking after the economy better.
Right.
And I think
and making sure that their district, like, why is old Waters, I forgot her name. She represents Baltimore. If you look, she's been there, Maxine Waters. She's been there for decades. I mean, literally her entire career has been representing this shitty part of Baltimore. And it has only looked worse.
Yep.
It has never looked better. Why? You couldn't, I can understand maybe in a 2-term, it's hard to do things. Maybe in 4 years, it's hard to do things. In 28 years, you couldn't make it look any different. That's amazing. That's you trying to not make it look any different. That takes effort.
And that's partly voters' fault as well. In that,
it is. 100%. But they just and like I was talking about this the other day. I was like, in working in local politics and campaigns, I know for a fact, whenever I'm talking about the community, and how we're gonna reach them and what we are gonna do with our messaging and where we're gonna host events, and everyone told me, don't worry, just have a barbecue the day of the election. I said, what? And they said, oh yeah, you just have free food, and then they ask you, who am I voting for, and you tell them, and you create a transportation system that you have no idea how it works, but you pay for this transportation system to take them from that barbecue to the polls. And then there's going to be your opponent who's also having a barbecue across town, and he's going to have a service. You just need to make sure you get more people to your barbecue than they have it there. And I was like,
it's so disrespectful too. Like, it is got
to
be
buying votes.
This is so race. Like, y'all call me race. Like. So people are just dumb. Y'all like don't even care. There's no education.
They think they're dumb.
It's just,
that's the problem. They think they know better. They're better than them, rather than actually giving them information and letting them vote for which suits them the best. It's that's insane.
So that is typical American. And that goes for presidential. That goes everything down to your county council. Your city council. Anyway, I'm just saying, like, sounds. I'm familiar. I'm familiar, and it's disgusting. But so I said, okay, so like you said, it's voter. We blame voters, right? Because they keep voting for this lady, but they keep voting for this lady because she keeps having the best food.
And also because I know the Republicans. Specifically, I think it was Kimberly Klacik who was one of the ones for the first time to go in and challenge in Baltimore. And she didn't do great, but I don't think she did bad either.
She didn't do bad. I mean, most people that go up against Maxine get 27%. I mean, they don't. You clearly don't beat her.
And I think the way she went about it was the right way, because they went door knocking and talking to people and explaining stuff. And I think
she had that viral ad the viral ad that went, of her walking through Baltimore and saying, I mean, that was powerful.
They replicated that across the board though, which is pretty she had the first one, and then I saw a whole heap. There was a guy, a lumberyard dude up in Oregon or whatever that was doing it too, and I was like, oh, now it just looks repetitive. But I think regardless of her politics, you need to have change in order to be able to, and that goes with maybe some of the red states too. Some of the things you've got to be able to flexible back and forth between the two in order to.
I come from a red state, and that's been red. The whole thing is red except for New Orleans. There's this little bitty part in the southeast. It's basically underwater. They're blue, and everything else is red. And I'm here to tell you that it becomes a contest as to who knows Jesus better, who is going to let you just shoot your gun from anywhere ever. You can just walk into the Piggly Wiggly, which is a grocery store. You walk into the pig and you bring your gun, and if you shoot it off, hey, with me, that's cool. And then because the other guy, he doesn't want you to pop your gun off at the Piggly Wiggly. That's why you don't need to vote for him. It just becomes this contest as to who is more retarded. Sorry, who's more ridiculous. And it just sounds ridiculous. It's just they start to sound ridiculous. Okay, you're for open carry, but this person's for open carry and the ability to kill anybody anywhere.
Yes, yeah. It's always extremes with the Americans too. There's never this. It's always an extreme. I've noticed that, and it's even with the guys in the LP, the guys that I'm following on there. You listen to some of them. There's a few of them that are pretty centered and based, but the extreme levels is pretty crazy. So it's who is more anarchist, and it's okay, we get it. We're not there yet.
We're not. That would be incredible. Everything you're talking about, everyone here supports, but that doesn't solve the problems of right now. So that's in fact that creates hella more problems than what we started this conversation with. So anyway, I just I know, like I said, I got off topic a little bit, but I was just curious as to your elected leaders and how they how they get paid, who decides how they get paid. And then because I was also getting to, so I leave the tennis on for my dogs during the day. So I come home and the Australian Open is open, is on. And they have all of these commercials and advertisements about coming to Australia, tourism ads, right? Yeah. And which, it's all about Melbourne and Sydney. I mean, it's beautiful. It's coming from America, it looks like paradise. But they don't tell you that if you are an average American, which clearly we're not to, some 90%, I don't even know where we're at now as far as vaccinated. And I don't even know how far we are with Australia's version and definition of, vaccinated, right? But yeah, I just thought it was really interesting that they're advertising for tourists to come there when you can't, you guys living there can't leave there. You can't tour anywhere. I guess you could, but to come back would be, it's hell.
So for us, especially in WA, the leaving's not necessarily a problem. The mandates would be dependent on the company doing the flying, and obviously a lot of our companies it's been hard because I think Qantas is one of the few that is still going. I don't know if any of the Australian ones, is our Virgin still flying in that? Because I know we tried to prop them up, and I don't know. I honestly don't know.
I think Qantas is. That's a good question. I'll look it up.
Well, I know a lot of the international flights into Perth have been cancelled now. They're cancelling a lot of them, like the Rome to Perth direct. Um,
No, I've really often wondered that because I know Australia relies a lot on tourism dollars,
Yep.
and the last
Well,
over.
that comes from Perth. That decision to cut the Perth to Rome
Yep.
direct flight comes from Perth. That wasn't a decision by the airlines. That was a decision by McGowan.
Mm. Mm.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But yeah, getting out, I believe you can do. About, like I said, I would not be allowed back in. So,
Right.
yeah.
So
Unless I flew
I just thought that was very. I just thought I'm watching
It's
tourist
weird.
ads on
Yeah.
the Australian Open on ESPN, and like, I know better. I mean, I know you guys. I know what it is, and I even showed I showed Ryan. I was like, look at this. They just make it look like you could just go. You could just go. You could just go to Melbourne, like no problem. Like you could just go and tour and see things. And it's obviously footage that they recorded from 2.5 years ago because nothing looks like that now.
No.
I just think, and I'm thinking, okay, yeah, you see all these images. You, an American, haven't been anywhere in over 18 months. And then you're like, hell yeah, let's go to Australia, And like, I know a lot of people that go to Australia, like, go visit, and it doesn't look anything like that. It doesn't look, and if you are, let's say, like I said, if you're an American, let's say you've had a vaccine and one booster, 2 boosters, right? You're thinking in your mind, well, I'm vaccinated. I went and did the thing. And then it's like, oh, no, homie. Not by Australia standards. You need they're on their 5th one, okay? They're about to have a 6th one or some shit, whatever.
That's Holland, yeah. Holland's planning for 6. Holland's already said that they're doing 6. It's like, I don't know. I don't know where it all ends up.
For what? What is that gonna do? What does that do? What does it do? That's the part where I'm like, okay, sell me on why people should have 6 shots.
In the space of a couple of years.
Right. I mean, does it guard against the variants? No? Okay. Well, does it does it protect you from, I don't know, some other crazy life-threatening illness, like an actual life-threatening illness that isn't a cold? No? Okay. Because it makes you feel better? I mean, yeah. I don't, so yeah, I've often, I just saw that last week, and like I said, having had the tournament on, just, this is I should have recorded. Next time I see one, I'm gonna put one on my phone. I'm gonna send it to you guys so that you can see that this is what they're advertising to the rest of the world.
It's quite ironic that they're running it through the tennis as well, considering they kicked Novak Djokovic out of the country over these backstats.
Which has not been a small story in the States. Yeah, that's not been ignored.
Yeah,
people know that. And there's a whole lot of Americans that applaud him. They're like, I don't even fucking watch tennis, but by God, I'm a fan of what? Jerk, is that his name? I'm a big fan of Jerk. Whatever his, because they too would not get vaccinated, and I know several.
The irony is he's not even. I've read up on it. No, he's not Australian, but also he's not. He's not. It's hard because he is, but he isn't anti-vax. If that makes sense, he has a strict thing for him and his body, but he's not anti it because he went and helped set up to get young tennis players vaccinated, he in his own country and stuff. So he's done. I know, but that's the thing was they're like, oh, they kicked him out because he might set an anti-vax sentiment. But I'm like, the guy was literally promoting getting other people vaccinated. The only reason he does is because he's got a strict body thing for his tennis. He doesn't do anything to it unless it's So I don't know.
No one. Here's what's funny. I'll tell you this. No one talks about Tom Brady's vax status.
Yeah.
Not never.
Is he back? No.
I think he would say he was just for the fact that he makes checks whenever people sign checks when he says that he's vaccinated. But I'm not for sure a man that's like, I mean, granted, he announced his retirement today, so
Okay.
the goat is gone. But like, I'm just saying, there are books written about his diet and the way he keeps
Yeah.
his body. So I am not convinced. I mean, maybe he did. Maybe he did. Maybe I'm wrong. But I am not convinced he went and got every single shot. No, because he would be like, I mean, he looks at his body like a science project. If I put this into my body, then what happens? How sick do I get? How long am I? Like, I mean, he's constant. I mean, now he doesn't have to think about that. I hope he eats all the cheeseburgers. You know what I mean? Like, I hope he eats all the cheeseburgers. Eat it. It's okay. You don't have to be a vegan plus anymore. You can just eat cheeseburgers. But up until yesterday, like I said, there were books written about how he maintains his body.
There's a lot of athletes like that.
And yeah, I'm not convinced that he would just put something in it because it makes someone else feel better. Because he's fucking Tom Brady. He doesn't have to. Just like Jokic or whatever. He's like, I am, the guy. I am the tennis guy, and I don't have, I have a regimen that I keep, and if I introduce this foreign stuff into my body, I don't know what it's going to do, and I'm in the middle of my season. Like, I'm in the middle of fucking open. So, no. Yeah. And that, that's okay.
It should be.
But I'm just not convinced. I think that's funny that they're like, oh, he produces a anti-vax sentiment. Like I said, I'm not convinced that Tom Brady didn't get vaccinated or did get, I'm not convinced he did. But you're still going to see him in commercials advertising for getting vaccinated.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. It's the same thing.
Well, on the Australian Open, on January 28th, our time, 2 days ago, the Australian Open at that night decided they were going to increase crowd capacity in the stadium to 80%. So they loosened the restrictions just in time for the finals, right? Coincidentally, the finals were the next night. They were the female finals with Ash Barty, world number one, who's an Australian, and the men's double finals. Both teams were Aussies.
Yeah.
No.
Science.
So everyone but one person who was involved in the two doubles that were in the two finals that were on last night. So you had the women's singles and the men's doubles. Only one tennis player of the six was not Australian.
Talk about political and the Australian Open. Did you see what Drew was doing at the Australian Open? Drew, the independent guy running for Senate in Queensland.
Drew Pavlo.
Drew Pavlo, yeah. He had the where is Peng? What's her name?
Peng Shuai.
Peng Shuai, because she's the Chinese tennis player who apparently went missing.
Oh, the one that disappeared.
Yeah, but she also did a video saying she was okay, and then I don't know. There's all this rumors around what's going on, but apparently she hasn't been seen for a while. So he went and gave out free Where is Peng Shuai shirts all across the Australian Open because one lady got kicked out for having it. They made her take her shirt off, and then they made the Australian Open back down or something. And then originally the Australian Open said you can't wear the Where is Peng Shuai shirts because they had hashtag Where is Peng Shuai on them, and I'll try and find a picture of those shirts actually. And the Australian Open said, you can't do that. It's political. Yeah.
So they said you can't be political, despite the fact that the whole Djokovic thing was political. Yeah. So we don't want to be political. You don't want to be political. You can't wear the Where is Peng Shuai shirts. We made them back down. So then they said. So then Drew Pavlo, who's anti-Chinese, kind of leftist, but he's strongly anti. He's strongly anti-China. He's been involved in universities in Brisbane, which have. Is it the Mandarin? No, the Confucian Institute, or something like that, which is, he's been involved with fighting those in Australian universities. And so he went down there to hand out Where is Peng Shuai shirts. And Jack went down there as well, helped hand them out. Jack says he handed out about 100. And so they were handing those yesterday. So Where is Peng Shuai on the shirts? And then according to Drew, the Australian Open told the Australian Open told Nine News' tennis team, who were recording it and filming it live for the TV, they said, don't pan to people wearing those shirts. So they handed it over 1,000, and then apparently Australian Open said, oh, don't put the camera on people who are wearing the Wear Is Peng Shui shirts.
They really care about this girl, right? They really care about this girl.
Well,
literally
Drew's,
could be like
Drew's his party that he set up has got members from the Uyghur community running as part of his party as well. So there's a lot of that's where a lot of his anti-CCP stuff sort of comes from, is that he has close connections with people who say that their family and members are in the camps or whatever. Like, I know there's a lot of debate and discussion about whether they are real and all this sort of stuff. But yeah, but I'm doing that just for the but yeah, so that's what he says anyway, and that's what they're claiming. So that's where that tie comes from and why he's pretty but he's done a good job keeping the main heads of politicians like aware about what's going on, that he knows who's involved. Another person who does a really good job on that is Nick Holt on Twitter. He does a lot of breakdowns into who's connected who through the Chinese. It's the same. You could do the same thing with the American governments as well, and any of the other stuff like Davos, World Economic Forum. They're all bloody interlocked. So yeah.
Well, switching gears. At the beginning of this, we talked about, what would it take for West Australia to finally start a conversation about divorce.
Yeah.
You know.
I know? So
I'm all about.
The irony is that if you had asked me 5 years ago, I would have been like, fuck yeah, let's get rid of the East Coast. Screw these guys. I hate them. Let's get away from them. Nowadays, I'm like, ooh, not so sure.
Tell me why.
There's a couple of reasons why. One, we wouldn't be able to. It's not logically possible. Like, we don't have the population. We don't have the defense. We don't have, like, if we were to secede from Australia, all the feds would have to do is just go, no, come back. You know what I mean? Like, there's not much you can do about it. But I actually think it's better to stay as a combined nation anyway, especially with our neighbours in terms of the CCP, etc. Because we are a mining-rich West Australia, so there's a lot. Mining and farming is pretty much our big two. So there's a lot of potential there for other nations who would like to come in, who would come in and corrupt the government, which is, we already know the government's corrupt anyway, but my point being is that, like, the influence would then be more direct in terms of how you could, if that sort of makes sense.
That has value, absolutely. I'm not, as much as I'm all for decentralization, I also understand, not everything can be separate and flourish. It doesn't even have to be separate and equal, just separate and flourish. And that's really, it's hard. It's hard. And especially when you have a federal government with guns and you have a state that has
a couple of bases.
None.
Yeah.
But I started thinking about it. I was really thinking about it. Like, okay, so, because I still think it's funny that, you guys are still tied to Lizzie, right? Like, Lizzie.
Oh yeah, I'm done with that.
Right. Okay, so she is, if she doesn't live forever, she can't, if she doesn't live forever, then that means she won't live forever. And her grandchildren have already shown that they recognize, their impact on economics, and that they are actively scaling back their role as royals, right? And look, I think any move that William is willing to make to say, hey, we're not going to make the public pay for that, I'm going to pay for that, like, great. I think that's wonderful. But when she dies, I think you will see a lot more of that, and you will see the generation say, you know what, this is ridiculous, and I know it's ridiculous, and I'm not going to put this burden. I see William maybe running for prime minister, relinquishing his title and saying, I still want to be a leader, but I want to run for prime minister, so I relinquish my title, which would then essentially dissolve the British royal family. There is no, everyone's either dead.
Because who's left then? Edward and Andrew.
Right, and
Andrew's a pedo, so Edward, it's just one of them. One person's left, but you lose.
Left.
Charles is still there.
William is the most popular by far.
Yeah, because the way I think it goes, much anti his all this, all of it, and he sees that it's dead. It's dead. It's died.
If the Queen wants the former colonies, to stay in the Commonwealth, then she'll probably appoint William as heir as opposed to Charles, because Charles is not popular at all.
People hate
him. She'll probably go for William, because if she appoints Charles, then chances are the Australian Republican movement, as in Republic, not the Conservative Party from America. It's confusing. You can't call yourself in Australia, you can't say that you're a Republican, because thanks to the US, that name is tainted. Thanks, guys. But yeah, I reckon if Charles becomes monarch, then you're going to see a lot of independence movements, especially in WA. Well, WA is the only party. WA is the only party to have a. Yeah. Well, because the Queen is popular. You're right. What were you saying? Sorry, centrist.
I think even if William get named, I think you'll see a heavier push as well, because obviously there's that sentimental tie to Lizzie. Because she's been around for so long, and the generations before ours even are still around, still voting, and there is a tie there. They got excited whenever they came to Australia. So I think with like you said, when she finally kicks the bucket, then. Yeah, I think you'll see there'll be another push towards changing our structure in terms of how we're governed, with the ties to the Queen. So
I've been really thinking about that. Like, because this would be like kind of a watered down version of America, and like whenever she does go, and like to see the former colonies, how they react, because. In looking at Australian politics, it's always like, well, we have all this, but if we needed, she's there. Like if we needed her, she doesn't get involved, but if we needed her, she's there. And so we'll have to defer to, Her Royal Highness if we, can't resolve, and when you don't have that backing, when politicians who have relied on that, and you have parties who have relied on that for decades, and now they don't have that royal, that royal backing, and they can't use it, as a crutch to continue the bullshit that they do. Then I really do think you will see people say, you know what, and it may take a generation to die. It may take the older people, like you said, who, have respect, and who respect the crown, and who see the crown as not a negative but a positive. They may take that generation to go before people say, okay, we are our own people, and we don't have to.
Sorry, there's also the group that's apathetic to it as well. Like, so for me, like, I've never been like a staunch let's become a republic, because I didn't trust people to vote in that president. If you look at our prime ministers over the last 10 years, you'd understand why.
We didn't vote for him though, so
yeah, I know, but it's but also, like, I don't see it as a positive or a negative. It's just is. Like, it's like there's a whole generation as well who are just like, who cares? Like, who cares if we stay a Commonwealth, and who cares if we become a republic? I don't think they really hold any strong way or one way or the other. But that might change with how COVID's response has been. So.
Right, that's what I was thinking. So if you don't have to, so if you could turn the people who say, well, it doesn't really matter either way, and then if you could just use the benefits, and maybe the benefits are not that much different from being a republic to being part of the Commonwealth. I mean, I realize I live in a tyrannical government. I live in America, and there's only about 17 people that have actual power in this country, and that's it. And there's 536 congressmen. So you know what I mean? Like, and there's only like 17 people that actually like have power. So, but if you could have, if you could just take that rhetoric and just like, no, being a republic would be cool. It's not necessarily different, but you could portray that there could be a difference, right? That would then get people excited to say, okay, well, you know what? Like, I don't know. I'm just thinking, and then if you can just like double down on COVID regime in Australia, that like, okay, with a republic, it could be easier versus a parliament. And because I'm biased against parliament. I think parliament hurts you hella worse than a republic would, especially in the beginning. It takes a long time for Congress to look like it does now. Like, it didn't look like this forever. You had corruption in and around, but like to have, anytime we use the word bipartisan, run for the hills, because it's not for your benefit, And then if you don't have a bipartisan effort, then you have a Republican or a Democrat led, which is basically just flip a coin. It's the same thing. But it used to not be like that. There really was a time when being bipartisan worked, and when being a Democrat and a Republican meant something different. Now it's the same thing. You might as well just be R&D, flip a coin. It's the same thing. It's the exact same thing. But it takes a while, I guess, what I'm getting at. So if you guys could have the ability to start and have that in today's world, right? With technology and the internet versus, how America has progressed from Andrew Jackson to Nancy Pelosi. And it used to be, not that I think that the president should have sole power, but like it used to be, if you voted for a Democrat, you were voting for a certain person who would vote ideologically along a certain line. You don't get that anymore. It's the same person. But had people had the technology and the information and the access to information that they have now in 1941, December 12th, 1941, America entered into World War II. I think it was December 8th, technically, but by the time it got to the Senate, it was December 12th that we entered into World War II. What if people could ballotpedia the people voting for it, and like, or fast forward even to 9/11. People didn't have the access that they do now. I don't know. I'm just saying, like, if you had the ability to like start a republic now, and then just like, it would look different. It would look different. It would be cool. It would be a cool social experiment to see like how different people feel, if they want to believe what is comfortable, if they want to know, like, this is their comfort zone, this is what they believe, so they want to stick with that, or if they say, you know what, maybe there is a different way to go about this that isn't blocking borders and keeping people from going to concerts.
Yeah, and I think that is it. There is I think what the Republic movement in Australia has lacked has been an understanding of, for example, American politics and how the other systems work, which we're now seeing because of the crossing over, like you said, with technology. We're now seeing how different, like the Electoral College, I used to think was like, what the fuck? Like, I didn't understand it. But then when I started to actually look into it and understand it, I'm like, not as opposed to it, because obviously it protects the minority as opposed to the big cities. And being a country kid, that made sense to me. But we're getting a push with a couple of the parties. I believe it's UAP and the Lib Dems who want to introduce a Bill of Rights type thing to protect Australians. So like it doesn't necessarily mean you go and become a republic, but that is a step towards, the right direction in terms of protecting a person's ability and their own liberty and their own lives, sort of things. So I think there's that ground movement that's starting to push towards that ideology of becoming a republic. So.
Which would
the Electoral College basically operates in a similar sense to Australia's referendums, you could say, because it's the same idea of ensuring that the whole reason for referendums that we have in the first place, which is a majority of people in a majority of states and a majority of people overall. The idea behind that is so that you weren't dominated by Melbourne and Sydney.
Yeah,
that's why the referendums exist. Is so you wouldn't have the domination of amending the constitution by those two states, by New South Wales and by Victoria. Yeah,
and
it's the same sort of approach. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
but I think a movement in Australia, to become a republic would have some success. WA is the only state to have the Waxit party. WA exit, as in Brexit.
Love it. Love it.
Yes, they haven't been very successful there, but in the past we have seen some success with Ethiopia becoming a republic. WA, I think, was 2 or 3 years later to joining Australia. So when the Constitution was sent to the British Parliament in 1900, WA hadn't agreed to joining Australia yet. So if you read the preamble to the Constitution, it mentions every state except Western Australia because they joined in 1903, slightly delayed.
Yeah, secession isn't a new thing. It's been going on for ever since.
Yeah, WA has
been talking about secession.
In terms of independence,
that's so cool.
In terms of independence, WA is Australia's Texas in that sense. In 1933. WA had a successful referendum to become independent of Australia, so they had a referendum to leave the Commonwealth, and it was successful. They went to the British Parliament, and the British Parliament said that's invalid. You can't do it. Now it could have worked in 1930. In 1931, the British government along with all the dominions, which are Australia, Canada, Ireland, Newfoundland, New Zealand, South Africa. Yeah, that's all of them. The Statute of Westminster, which would basically mean the UK couldn't pass laws on behalf of the dominions unless they asked for it expressly. That wasn't passed in Australia. It passed in a couple of other colonies, but it wasn't passed in Australia. Now, if that had been passed in 1931, WA could have then been successful in leaving Australia because it wouldn't have had to go to the British Parliament. But it wasn't adopted until 1942. Now, the reason why that happened is because Australia was very much pro the Empire, pro Britain. Then in 1942, because Australia joined World War II when Britain did, our Navy was operating under the British naval laws. And until a couple of Australian naval soldiers, I don't remember their rank, but a couple of people who were on one of the Australian Navy ships, for court-martial for murder, I think, which had the death penalty under UK laws, but not under Australian laws. So then the Australian government went, we made a mistake here. So they passed the Statute of Westminster finally, but backdated it to 1939. So in the past, when Australians do realise that sticking with Britain is a very bad idea, it takes a while to get to that point. But then when you get to that point, it then happens. In the same way that we had a vote to change our national anthem from God Save the Queen, which my father remembers singing in school. But that wasn't then changed to Advance Australia Fair. That was under Gough Whitlam, who was eventually sacked by the Governor-General on behalf of the Queen. But we have a lot of Gough Whitlam's proposals to become more independent were controversial. One of the least controversial ones was standardising the rail gauges, because before then, the states didn't have a standard rail gauge. So Gough Whitlam helped fund that to fix it. It was a problem we had before becoming a Commonwealth, was the rail gauges were all different. different tariffs and different rail gauges meant it was very confusing, which is one of the original motives for joining the Commonwealth in the first place. But yeah, when Australia does eventually, see that there's a benefit in leaving, they have in the past become more independent-minded. We've seen it with WA, and again, Gough Whitlam, a lot of his proposals, which at the time were controversial, especially the national anthem, and now seen as being a good thing. Although then, of course, you had the Governor General then sack him and say, okay, we're going to put the Liberal Party and then have an election, and then Gough Whitlam lost, probably in part because of his changes, but it does show that in Australia, you can get to the point of, leaving the British control, which I think is important to remember in the light of becoming a republic, or at least separating even further from the Commonwealth, the British Commonwealth.
Absolutely.
It's confusing because Australia's Commonwealth, and you also have the British Commonwealth, two different Commonwealths. And in fact, that word comes from Virginia. So we get that from you guys.
Right. I was going to say that sounds like Virginia. Okay. That proves my point. Great. That yes. So whenever she goes to die, I'm very excited to see.
Adrena Crome, she can't die.
I understand she's a living person and she can't die, but when she one day at some point decides that she's no longer going to be queen of England and the Commonwealth, then I look forward to the day that Australia has the opportunity to say we have a choice. Whoa,
Because you're right, the boomers in Generation X are going to be very reluctant to leave because they're used to the Queen. The Queen's been the Queen since 1952?
2, 3, something like
I think
that?
so.
I watched Netflix.
I think 1950, yeah.
Pretty sure.
Early 1950s.
Yeah. A long time.
She's younger than Betty White is, so there is that.
There is that. Well,
I think she's like 2 or 3 years younger than Betty White, but still, like, they're not going to have any success becoming a republic until she, to put it politely, kicks the bucket. But once she does, yeah, you're right. That is an opportunity for the Australia to separate itself more from the empire.
I really look forward to the day to see like how they react, and the younger people that say, oh well, then I don't identify with anyone over there or over there. I identify with this, and like there's nothing. Australia is technically a continent and a country, right? So,
because the baby boomers are predominantly Anglo-Saxon, so they're all British. But right. we explored this last time with Tyler, that younger generations are more diverse in terms of because of a lot of migrants. So as younger generations grow in size, you're going to see less of that tie to the British, the ethnic tie at least, or a cultural identity, being seen as more as being Australian than being British. Because a lot of people, especially baby boomers and Generation X, still have British passports and the like because of that tie. So people in Australia still have the British passport because because of that. Because 1965 is the cutoff date. Yeah, so baby boomers and some Generation X still have British passports.
Yeah, there's also a catch with that is that if you have a grandparent that was born in England by a certain date, you could then claim. So I missed out on claiming a British passport because my nana was born 3 years after the date that they chose. But if she had been born 3 years earlier, then I could have got a British passport. Having never been to England in my life. Yeah. So, yeah, there's some crazy rules and regulations around it all that still sort of tie people back to Britain. But
that's kind of crazy. It's a little insane. Someone who's never even thought about living in a different place and another place and having a passport from that place.
Well, Cedric, was it 2019? Was it 2019 we had the debate over citizenship for the MPs? Was that 2019 or was that earlier?
Oh, that's good. I forgot about that.
2019 and 2017. So under the Constitution,
when we had all the mass self-sacking.
It might have been. It might have been 2017 actually, because it was before the last election. See, back in 27, I'm going to say 2017. I'm going to run with that. We had a debacle with at least like 9 or 10 politicians who were citizens of Australia in another country.
Yeah.
Which isn't allowed under the Constitution.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, I think originally there was an exemption for being British. I don't know if that's still a case. I don't think it is.
Because it started off with Ludlam, wasn't it? Was it Ludlam, the Greens leader at the time? Was that Ludlam?
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, I think it started with him.
He had that whole debacle as well.
Yeah, because he was like, I didn't realise that apparently I'd have dual citizenship. I'm not allowed to do that. But his is weird because his was with New Zealand, I think, wasn't it? I think it was with New Zealand. I'm doing this off memory from a long time ago, so don't.
Same. New Zealand. Blah, blah, blah. I know. One of them was New Zealand. One of them was Canada. Yeah. One of them was Malta.
And I was like,
New Zealand 7 people
part of Australia anyway.
So there were 6 senators and Barnaby Joyce, deputy PM, in 2017, and the High Court ruled that 5 were ineligible because of being dual citizens of the countries.
Yeah.
Oh, it's even more than that. ABC saying 9 senators to members of the House of Reps.
New Zealand, because he was born in New Zealand. Scott Ludlam was born in New Zealand and has become Australian since. So he came over. So he had dual citizenship with New Zealand and Australia, which I remember at the time going, like, who cares? Like, it's not like it's it's not like it's another nation that's, you could argue politics and, like it wasn't China or Germany or, it wasn't even England. Like, it was New Zealand who are basically like little sister, little brother, like they're like family. Like, they're basically part of Australia anyway. Like,
right,
like we have so many in between Kiwi and like Australians in New Zealand and New Zealanders in Australia. It's like we're basically one big family. So when they said that, I was like, why the hell is he? Like, it didn't make any sense to me that he had to resign because he didn't relinquish his New Zealand citizenship. And I was just like, yeah, I just thought that was a bit stupid, to be honest. But it led to a lot of people getting caught out where they shouldn't have been doing it. So I suppose my self-sacrifice in order to take down some of the competition, maybe. But
yeah, the ABC is saying that you are 11 politicians federally resigned or were forced out by the High Court over the space
and that
looks like
feds as well.
3 years. 11, and then a couple more there was a debate about Barnaby Joyce. There was a debate about him. He wasn't sacked though, but some of them were.
What was the other one that was there? Was Dutton one of them?
Possibly. I know Brandis was.
Yeah. There was a lot.
Kate Gallagher was referred later on, but yeah, there was a fair few from all different parties, on just one side. There we go. I've had to pull up my Constitution PDF that I have on my computer. Under Part 4 of the Constitution, which applies to both houses of Parliament, under Section 44I, any person who is under acknowledgement of allegiance, obedience, or adherence to a foreign power, or is a subject of or a citizen of a foreign power, or is entitled to the rights or privileges of being a subject or a citizen of a foreign power, cannot hold office.
There you go.
Yeah. So foreign citizenship is with any country, including Britain.
There you go. Yeah.
Although, for a lot of time, being an Australian citizen meant that you were British, but at the same time, so at one point, you're considered of being both. There were a few Australian prime ministers who went on to be involved with the British government. I think an Australian minister who was, it could be Evans, who was Foreign Affairs Minister and also High Commissioner to the British Empire and also Governor of India at one point. So at one point, being British and being Australian were one and the same thing. But once they introduced the idea of having separate passports, then that became a problem for being citizens of both Britain and Australia.
If you wanted to run for Parliament, obviously you can.
Yes. Yeah. Or even being, for anyone running in any House of Parliament, at least federally. I'm presuming the states have the same rules.
Yeah, we do. We just decided, like, on those rules, like, 200
Is there a
years
rule? Is there a rule that you can't be born overseas to be president if you want to be president?
Yes.
Have I read that at some point? Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
that is part of being president.
So you can't be born overseas. Even if you do the citizenship and everything, you still can't. It's interesting.
No. You must be born. You must be a naturalized citizen here, and even dual citizenship can cause problems.
Yeah, that's fair.
Well, that explains why QAnon doesn't believe that Obama is the real president because they claim he was born overseas, don't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so,
interesting.
if you are not born in America, now you can be part of Congress. But as far as being president, that is expressly stated. There is no insinuation. You have to be born here in the 50 states. Even I would suggest that even if someone decided to run from Puerto Rico, the first time we have a Puerto Rican candidate, a serious one, like a real one, you will see problems. Because people will say, well, Puerto Rico,
not a state.
Is Puerto Rico considered part of the states though?
It's a territory.
So technically,
and
you're born there.
U.S. territories have less rights than Australian territories do.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So you get to vote. So
they don't even have senators.
No.
So whereas the rule in Australia is that states have 12, territories have 2. For the US, it's 2 for states and 0 for territories. Correct? Am I correct?
Yeah.
And do they have anyone in House of Reps?
If they have any in the House, I don't think they have any in the House of Reps unless that's changed in the last 15 years. If they do, they definitely don't have any place in the Senate because there's 535 members of Congress. There's 100 in the Senate. Period. There's 2 per state.
From memory, I think DC has a non-voting member of the House of Reps, but
Correct.
That's it.
That's it.
Which is why DC has the 3 electoral college votes as opposed to having 1 or none.
Exactly.
Yes. So does the territory then receive or have to follow federal laws?
Yes.
So if they receive funding and have to follow federal laws, but they don't get a representation in how the federal government is run, that's pretty crap, to be honest. If you're making someone follow your rules, but then you don't get to have a say in how those rules are dictated to people.
Which is why we don't bring up Puerto Rico often. I bring up Puerto Rico often. Puerto Rico, you guys, somebody a generation or so ago thought that they had a good deal and they had a terribly raw deal.
Rude.
Yeah. And they signed on because at some point somebody got handed a bag of money, I'm sure. But then there was never another bag of money ever.
So given. If they were to get representation, what would that mean? Is this where they say the stack in the court thing comes in or whatever it is?
Yes. And that's whenever, so you have 50, 2 per state, right? You have 50, you have 100 members of the Senate. If you add 2 more members to the Senate,
someone gets a majority.
Somebody gets a majority.
Yeah.
If they don't have a majority, and if you have a 49, 50 situation, then how do you get anything done in 6 years? The term for a senator is 6 years. So, and then if based on population, that would increase the number of 435 representatives in the House of Representatives. So we've dealt with a majority, with a leftist majority, obviously. We've dealt with that for a long, long time. But you've always had the Senate to balance that power. So what happens, and like you said, in stacking the court, and so that's why Democrats definitely want Puerto Rico to have the ability to become a state.
Would Puerto Rico go Democrat though? Yeah.
Yes, in a heartbeat.
Because it's also why they also push for DC statehood for the same reason. because that's guaranteed to give them 2 senators
like,
to the Democrats.
No, I'm not
Exactly.
interested in that. I'm not interested in that. But the Puerto Rico one is obviously
Puerto Rico. Yes, Puerto Rico.
Morally, they should have a representation. Like I know that it's it, but if they are controlled by the feds and they're funded by the feds and they've got everything, they've got to follow all the same rules. They should have representation, whether it's a majority or not.
Agreed.
And I didn't realize that is when I was listening and learning about stacking the court and stuff. It sounded to me like it was some sort of dodgy thing to try and get a thing. But after you've explained that, no, I think Puerto Rico deserves that representation. That's
they do.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's right. That's crap. They get the raw deal.
You know, I actually had a friend that just traveled there for New Year's Eve. He went down there, yeah, it's like the Wild Wild West, from what it sounds like. You know, where they have these laws that the federal government of America puts over them, but then like they do their own thing. But whenever they need help, like if a hurricane comes, or
okay, well,
whatever, you're like FEMA, hey.
Yeah, what they should get then is a referendum to choose whether they want representation in the state. There you go. That solves everyone's problem. Yeah.
Anytime they tried to have it,
they vote no.
just like kill it, like whether it's Republicans, Democrats, because it's one thing to go on CNBC or MSNBC or Fox News or CNN or whatever and be like, Puerto Rico should have representation, or Puerto Rico doesn't deserve representation. It's a whole nother ballgame when they decide that they want to try for representation. Then both sides, look it up, both sides magically are like, we don't want that. We do not want that, because that would upset the balance of power, and the balance of power is not always correlated with what party is dominating the House. Just because the House may have more members does not mean that they
You're not selling a republic to me very well at the moment.
I'm not, because it's absolute garbage. But I'm telling you, like, that's why, like, anytime you look at a referendum, there's been a few over my lifetime, 31. So over my lifetime, there have been a few Puerto Rican referendums.
Is it just the Puerto Ricans who are voting?
And what?
Is it just the Puerto Ricans that are voting?
Supposed to be.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
But yeah.
And then but then you see both sides of the aisle say, "Oh no, they can't be a state. If they become a state," I mean, I've heard every excuse under the sun as to why Puerto Rico should not be a state from both sides. And
so it's kind of like the UK saying to Western Australia, "You can't leave Australia."
It's the same thing. It is the exact same thing. That, oh yes, they should be their own state. They should have their own representation. They should be their own people until you go to try.
And
then
if
no.
If Puerto Rico becomes a state, the problem is domino effect. All the Pacific Islands, what about Guam and American Samoa? Like, what happens to them?
What happens to them, Stuart?
Yeah, then you have to try and draw state borders there. It's an ongoing problem. You have domino effect, and suddenly all the islands are going to want statehood. And then if they've got statehood, why isn't DC a state?
Yeah, but DC is inside of another state, isn't it?
DC is their version of the ACT.
Okay.
It's its own thing.
I don't know what the ACT is, but yes.
Cesspool.
Australian Capital Territory. It's our version of DC. Except it's a territory that has 2 senators. I think are both Labor.
I have no idea, to be honest. I don't follow ACT politics.
ACT always ends up giving us Labor politicians because they're all bureaucrats. Because it's Canberra. It's basically Canberra.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So yeah. If you were to give one, then yes, you do the math on the rest, and which I would love to see the dissolution of the Republican Party. I would love to watch it personally. I will remind all of you guys that Lincoln was a Republican, and everyone that enforced And everyone that enforced Reconstruction was a Republican. Being from the South, I would love to watch them all go down beautifully. I really like to remind people of that often, that while the party is flipped, Republicans have been rhinos since its inception because Republicans have been Democrats forever. So I am all for the dissolution of both parties, but definitely the Republican Party. I would love to watch it happen. But they would dissolve if Puerto Rico became a state, and then if Samoa would apply for statehood, and definitely if DC became a state, because no one that lives in DC is from America. Just know that. Like, having been to DC, there are transplants. There are lots of people, I guess, from America that live there, but the people that would vote there who are not registered to vote in Virginia or Maryland, who are actually registered to vote in DC, would not vote Republican.
No.
So it would make them dissolve. And then, you see where it goes from there. But that's why Puerto Rico remains this debate topic. And that's all it will ever be until, in my opinion, Puerto Rico should just become the country of Puerto Rico.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Can they just because there's no benefit to it, just go your own way. So.
Just say, we don't take your money anymore. We're going to have our money, just like we want that in Campusine, right? Like, we have our own money, we raise it, and we spend it on XYZ, and like, we're not going to give you our money anymore so that you can do with it what you want and not support the now country of Puerto Rico, the sovereign country of Puerto Rico. And honestly, if Puerto Rico was like, we want to be our own country, here's our little military, y'all come at us, I really don't think America would they'd be like, okay. You know what I mean? Because they're not voting. It solves that problem.
It solves that problem for them. Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, if Puerto Rico would just be like, you know what? We're not going to take your money anymore. We may be even like Haiti, and we may be broke, but like, ultimately, when a hurricane hits Haiti or when an earthquake hits Haiti, who's there? America and FEMA. So if you have a natural disaster, that's not a good reason to stay a part of the Union or to stay a territory of the United States, because ultimately, if something really bad happens to you, we'll be there anyway.
Yeah.
America
gets Australian help all the time. Like, whenever you get your big California bushfires, our firefighters fly over to go help. So it's like, it's not, something like that I wouldn't be so concerned about in terms of, like, if that was a deciding factor, I'd be, I think they're the better off.
Aid and money and food to every developing country on the planet. So if you need food or healthcare, there's we give that to you anyway. So, I've always had it forever. Puerto Rico should just say, you know what, we're done, and they would have
or demand that they get representation.
Yeah, so, or to be representation. Yeah. They're not gonna. So just be cool with being Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
Before we leave, very much have a question. What the fuck is Australia Day?
July 4th. Australia's July 4th.
But you are not free from. Again, that's why I brought up the Queen in the first place, so that I could bring this up. You're not independent from shit.
So it's not independence. It's Australia Day is supposed to, and I'm trying to tread carefully because this is a very issue every damn year, and no one wants to solve it. They just want to argue about it. It's supposed to represent the coming together and celebration of the nation, basically. it's necessarily an independence type thing, but it's supposed to be just a representation of pride in your country. But obviously, not everyone's proud of what's happened, which is understandable considering what happened. There's a lot of heated discussion whether the date should be changed and whether we should.
What's significant about that date?
It's depends who you talk to, but it's representational of like the Aboriginal. Sorry, I won't say all of them because that's wrong, which is why it makes it such a difficult discussion to have. But a group of the population, particularly Aboriginal, call it Invasion Day. That's the day where it celebrates. Like they think it's celebrating the invasion of the country as opposed to celebrating a nation coming together. They see it as a nation being taken away, which I can understand because if your whole history, and they've had it's been shit. What happened to the Aboriginals is absolutely disgusting. And but I don't know how this discussion about a date, like how we can move on from it, because there's so many different voices and opinions on it. And some come from the Aboriginal community where they don't want to change the date, and some do want to change the date. And then there's also the lefties who definitely want to change the date. And then there's the conservatives who are like, no, we shouldn't change the date. And then everyone else in the middle is like, can we just solve this problem so we can get on with just enjoying the rest of the time? Because I don't want to celebrate a day that's going to make someone feel like shit, but I also don't want to, if we're going to change the date, I want to make sure that we're not going to have this discussion again the next year.
Right, that'll be the end of that, right?
Yeah, but it never is the end. That's the problem. Whenever because it's even if you change the date, the topic is still around celebrating being Australian. And if you're Aboriginal, there's no celebrating what happened to your people. Do you know what I mean? Like you could argue that you could maybe say like now with time, but like in general rule, you can't, there's no way that someone can rationalize celebrating the day, like a day of invasion.
So to put it in US terms, Australia Day is kind of like celebrating either the day that Columbus found America, or the creation of Jamestown. So January 26th is when the first fleet landed in Botany Bay. No, there was Botany Bay.
I think so, yeah.
No. Okay, so no, Botany Bay was the 20th. So they landed in Botany Bay by the 20th of January 1788. The problem was it wasn't a good landing. So originally Captain James Cook, who found Australia, The Dutch found it first, and before the Chinese possibly found it. But he landed in Botany Bay, claimed Botany Bay for the British Empire. And that was 1770. So then the first fleet turns up under Captain Arthur Phillip, and they turn up in 1788. January 20th is by the time the last ships reached Botany Bay. Problem was Botany Bay wasn't a good location to set up a colony. So then Phillip and some of his men went north. I think it was north. Found Sydney Cove. Then went back. Then it was bad weather. Then the French turned up.
Yeah, it's and this is why the date it gets so
two French warships. Two French warships turned up and then they landed with, and then meanwhile the first fleet's there.
What?
And so they're confused, and then there's bad weather.
Yeah,
and then the fleet finally gets out, and they land at Sydney Cove on January 26th around 3 p.m. So that's why Australia Day is January 26th.
Well, they recorded it. They've got the log.
Because
they lied to y'all. They lied to y'all. I'm just telling you.
Because they had clocks. They had clocks and stuff by then, and so that's when they reached Sydney Cove was January 6th, 1788, which is why Australia Day is January 26th of every year. The problem is that, and this is going into legal history, when they landed, they declared the land terra nullius, which is an old British law term to mean that it was unoccupied. The problem was it was occupied by the Indigenous Australians. However, because the land was declared terra nullius under Australian, and I might do an episode on this yet, I'm debating, or an article on this because it's really important to talk about, is that under English law and international law, there were three different categories of land. Terra nullius was the worst of them, was that there was no one there, so you can do whatever you want with the land. It's basically yours to take, except the Aboriginals live there. The problem is that these are British people, so they're like, civilization means that they're saying it's not civilized, because to the British, civilization means you live in one place and are farming. However, for the Indigenous, civilization meant hunter-gatherer lifestyle. But because they weren't farmers, the Europeans went, they're barbarians, they don't count, which is why it then becomes invasion. So to contrast that with New Zealand, the British and the Maoris signed a treaty. That treaty was since violated, but there was at least a legal binding treaty because the Maoris were more advanced. They had closer ties to the Polynesian islands, so they had a more advanced style of civilization. It was more settled with some farming and stuff in New Zealand, as opposed to Australia, which was all hunter-gatherer lifestyle. So the Maori were recognised. There's farms, there's a chief, they've got houses, therefore they're a civilization. Australians, hunter-gatherers, they're not a civilization, they're not farmers. And that's when you then have the debate around, is it an invasion, is it colonization, is it a settlement? And that's why it's so controversial. For me personally, I'm not the happiest about it being January 26th. For me, I feel like a more appropriate day would be January 1st. Because January 1st, 1901 is when Australia became Australia. We got independence on January 1st, 1901. So to me, Australia Day would make more sense as being on January 1st. Because again, being the 26th, does have implications for the Indigenous. The argument the Conservative government doesn't support it. That's the problem, is that the Liberal Party won't support changing it, and they're the government for since 2013, the last 9 years. They don't support changing it, and it's still a controversial topic for a lot of white people on the left. But the vast majority of the right won't support changing it. That's the problem.
I think a lot. I want to put in here. I think a lot of the discussion isn't necessarily that, because I've seen the discussion from both sides on this, and some of them are just because they're assholes. Like both sides. There's people who are just like, no, you have to do what I say, blah blah blah. They don't want to get involved. But I think a lot of the people who want to keep it the 26th are just more like, it's not going to change anything. I think you're looking at the wrong topics. Jacinta Price, which she cops a lot of flack from the left. She's an Aboriginal woman. She's a politician, but she says we've got bigger issues to worry about than this. This is we can talk about this later on. Let's focus on doing some real change in the communities and helping people. That's her position. So it's not that she's necessarily anti-Australia Day being changed. She's just we have bigger problems to deal with. I'm sick of wasting so much time on it, which is okay. And that's fine to have that response. I like the idea of doing the Rum Rebellion Day. To me, I think that sounds great. So they had the Rum Rebellion.
Me too.
Yeah. Let's do it. Overthrow the government every year. Yes. Sounds great. But it's funny because I actually got that meme that I shared from the leftist circle. So it's there's a unity point there. The left and the both could go for Rum Rebellion Day on the 26th. You keep it a public holiday, and you put Australia Day on the 1st. So
I'd rather not do.
You should not put it on first. You should put it on the 2nd, because then you have New Year's Day, right? Y'all have the same calendar we do, right? So New Year's Day as a holiday, right? No one goes to work. Then if you made it
centrist, the problem is Rum Rebellion was January 26th, 1808.
Yeah.
It's the exact same day. So you can't change it to be that day. Because it's still the same day.
No. Change the celebration of the 26th to Rum Rebellion Day. So you're not celebrating Australia Day. You're not celebrating the settlement of Australia. You're celebrating the Rum Rebellion. So
A military
it's
coup.
public holiday. Yeah, I love
Yeah, but
that.
it's basically a military coup.
Good, beautiful.
And that's not going to be popular for anyone because it's a military coup.
I think you underestimate how popular that'll be after COVID.
That would be like that's like St. Patrick's Day here.
Yeah, we have.
And it would also be if we had a holiday, which I have advocated for most of my life. Why doesn't if we have holidays? I went through the bank holiday calendar. It said, why don't we have a holiday for the Boston Tea Party?
I don't know a lot about the Boston Tea Party, but
it's a big event that inspired an entire revolution.
So was sorry, so fill me in on my history because I heard of the Boston Tea Party, but
Boston Tea Party, which is awesome, my favorite. In fact, if I were to ever tell a drunk history story, this is one of them. So, it's also important for everyone to understand before I go into this that our founding fathers, who were philosophical and brilliant. And they were a bunch of fucking degenerates, is what they were. They were a bunch of degenerates, and they owned bars, and they smoked, and they were drunks, and they were not great people. Okay, they just had balls. So these ballsy people got drunk, really drunk, and they were pissed off about the Tea Act, which increased taxes on tea coming to America, which. You people are halfway British. Y'all know how important tea is and shit. People were like, this aggression will not stand, man. Okay? Can't abide by this, So a bunch of the dudes, basically, if you ever seen the Big Lebowski, basically a bunch of Lebowskis were like, hey man, I can't abide by this. You know what I'm saying? And so they were like, hey, I got an idea. We are gonna dress up like Native Americans, Indians. We're gonna dress up like feather Indians, okay? Not red dot, feather Indians. And we are gonna go on this boat and we are just gonna dump out all the tea. So that the British soldiers couldn't have their tea either. Because that's basically what it was. It was like a ship full of tea that would have serviced the redcoats, right? Because the redcoats got whatever they wanted. And they said, we're not gonna pay taxes on this. So what are we going to do? We're just going to go. So they got on this boat. Got on this boat, dressed up like Indians, drunk as shit, and they dumped all the tea out into the Boston Harbor. And that's when the British troops got mad because they were like, we don't have our tea. And that's when the colonists got mad because they were like, well, fuck you. We don't get our tea either. And we are not going to pay for you to have tea. Because it's basically what the tax was, right? You are getting taxed on your tea so that you can afford for the British troops to have their tea for free. So they went on the boats and they dumped the tea into the harbor and they got arrested. And it was this whole thing. But that's basically you can do the math on that, and it's less than 30 days until the shot heard around the world in Boston. So the British Tea Party was a really big deal. And I always say, so Columbus Day, that you can't even pinpoint, you don't know, this motherfucker landed in goddamn Cuba or some shit. You know what I mean? He did not come to Florida. He did not come to, that's Ponce de Leon. Ponce de Leon came to Florida, not him. And so I just always thought it was interesting that we celebrate this man that landed in some shit, the Caribbean, but we don't celebrate people who actually did something for America. And the British and the Tea Party, the Boston Tea Party, was an event that literally shaped America. If they would not have dumped that tea out, I've read umpteen people that maybe the revolution would have taken another 2 years. So
the people who did the tipping of the tea, that was the founding fathers. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. So Samuel Adams, It's hard to tell. It's hard to sit here and say there was a roster of people that signed their names before they got on the boat. But yes, Americans would consider those men to be founding fathers, which I always thought was really funny because they're just a bunch of young
drunk idiots by the sounds of it.
The drunk idiots that were like, we're gonna put some feathers in our hair, we're just gonna go do this thing. Which most of the founding fathers understand. Just had big balls. They weren't necessarily brilliant. They weren't necessarily, I don't know, they weren't Martin Luther Kings of their time. The people that knew them were like, them some bitches are fucking crazy.
Crazy.
And they will shoot your head off for no reason. And they just really, 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 really hate the British. And they hate being British. And they hate everything that has to do with it. Now, were they brilliant in their executions? Yes. But as far as like having goddamn Socrates living in fucking New York, no. They just were like, we don't like the way you do your shit. And y'all are broke. They also knew Britain is broke. You're broke. And if you didn't have us to fund your bullshit, you wouldn't have anything. So y'all can keep taxing us on our tea, and y'all can keep demanding that we keep your troops in our house. But eventually something's going to give. And so that's whenever the women got smart and started making their own clothes. They didn't need the textiles coming from Britain. That's when old homeboy came from Britain with the plan of the textile mill in his head and drew it out and said, this is how they do it. So you don't have to pay textile taxes anymore from Britain. We'll just make our own shit. Like, that's when all that shit happened. But it wasn't, but like I said, it's not because they were just so like sage and wise. And they were just ballsy as fuck and said, what are you going to do? You're going to send people over from Britain to come send me to court?
Yeah.
Come on. Like I dare you. Like I dare you. So that's why I've always thought the Boston Tea Party, if we're going to celebrate Columbus, we should probably celebrate the Boston Tea Party. Because like I said, if it had not been for that, and I've read a lot of people that say it could have taken 18 months for another 2 years for that to even have started.
Oh,
there's no telling, right? There's no way to tell that, but like it was a big catalyst. It was a big catalyst. And I don't know what it is with tea and you people. I don't get it.
Not me. No.
I don't understand. But apparently at the time, it was like a really big fucking deal. They didn't get their tea, and then the British didn't get their money for it. And so then they were like real mad. But that's why I always like to I love studying, especially when you look at like elementary school social studies books on like talking about the founding fathers. And you would think that they're all a bunch of like Socrates, Plato, just like philosophical brilliance.
Yeah, mad lads.
No, man, they're a bunch of fucking crazy people. Because how crazy do you have to be, gentlemen, to look at your family in England, Scotland, Ireland, whatever, and say, I think I can do better than what we've been doing. And your dad's like, do better than what you've been doing. This is a feudal system, boy. This is it. This is what we do. We are sheep farmers. This is what we do. We do the sheep. And that's it. And he's like, no, man, I think I can go to this other place. And if I can make it there, I think I could do something better. And like, they did. You know what I mean? Like that takes a crazy person. That takes a person who's like, I'm probably never going to see my mom and daddy ever again. And they're 17 years old. Now, in our time, being 17 is different, but like, they're basically 16, 17 years old that are like, I'm going to get on this boat and I'm going to go across to this place. And they say that there's opportunity over there and I'm going to be better and I'm going to do better than being a sheep farmer in Scotland. That's what my people did. I'm a McRae. That's my name. That is my name. Like, we come from the middle of fucking nowhere, Scotland. And my people came by way of Virginia down through Alabama and settled in western Louisiana. Before that was even a place. That wasn't even like a place. That was just land. I'm just saying that like it took a crazy person to decide that America is where they were coming. person of any type of stature, a person of any type of money. They didn't come to America. If they came to America, it was because they worked for the crown. But regular people, just regular colonists, they were kind of messed up. And so whenever you look at someone like the Boston Tea Party, and you just look like at a collective of crazy people who said enough is enough, got drunk enough to be like, enough is enough. And it literally was the spark that made the revolution. Because people got wind of that, right? Of course, that story grew from, crazy people dumping tea in the harbor to, heroes, right?
Yeah.
And then that spread down. That spread down to the Carolinas, to Virginia, to Florida, to Georgia. Like, whoa, like they got balls up in Boston. Us too. Fuck that, and fuck the crown, and fuck this bullshit. We're down. We're done too. We're done too. We don't have a tea party or nothing, but we're gonna put a tax on our tobacco. See how they like that? And they didn't. And that's when they sent the redcoats down to North Carolina and Virginia and said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! King likes his tobacco, likes smoking. We got a problem." And they were like, "What you gonna do about it?" And that's literally it was a series of events like that. Goods that the British people wanted that they could not produce on their own, that America could, and said, "Well, what are you gonna do if I tax you more? If I charge you more? What are you gonna do? You're gonna pay it to pay me, or don't, and we'll shoot each other. This is easy." So I'm just saying that I look at that history, and I look at those people, and I look at their resilience. And I would like to think that if Australia had the opportunity, they would take that opportunity as well, and say, "We don't have to do this. We don't have to abide. What are you gonna do?" And if they say, "Well, we're gonna come shoot you all," okay, well, you can shoot us all, and then we're still a part of Australia, but then you're lacking tax dollars. I'm just saying, there's if you have a resource that they want, you hold it hostage, and you say, "What are you gonna do if you don't get it? You're gonna shoot us all." Then you're not gonna have anyone to refine it. You're not gonna have anyone to pick it. You're not gonna have anyone to do anything with it. Then what? And I'm just saying, eventually, people don't want that kind of violence because they don't want that kind of international attention. So they'll be like, "What can we do to make this work?" I would like to think in a civilized, as you mentioned, a civilized society that we could then look at each other and say, "Well, how do we do this?" Because then I would be real quick to remind them of what they considered a civilized society and what they didn't. And see, you people like to celebrate January 26th because you overcame a non-civilized society. You don't want to change it to the 1st because that would mean that you did not conquer something.
Yeah, that's a very good way to put it, actually. I love that.
Conquering something makes for a much more monumental day and story. Just like D-Day, just like anything. We went to France and we just overtook the beaches. You think that's what happened? Because it's not. But it makes for a great story. Just like overtaking uncivilized society and making them civilized makes for a heroic story. So again,
date aside, again, having the date as January 26th is going to be causing some tension. But apart from that, the Rum Rebellion as a whole is probably a good thing to celebrate. And the favorite thing about the Rum Rebellion, and I'll just talk about this briefly before we finish up, because we're approaching the 2-hour mark, is that the soldier who led it was a certain Major George Johnson. Now, he served with the British as a Marine in the American Revolutionary War. So he served to fight you Americans, He then came to Australia as a major in the British Army on the first fleet, and then led a rebellion against Governor Bligh and overthrew him.
Well, there you go. So
because
he's
Governor,
a turncoat.
He's a turncoat, literally a red coat turncoat.
Beautiful.
Yeah, well, because the Governor
That's
Bligh had
actually pretty cool.
stopped. Well, because again, currency didn't have much effect in Australia, so they started using bartering, and Governor Bligh stopped that, and he cracked down on what the military were doing, and he cracked down on what the people were doing. There was a group of prisoners that were acquitted, and then he kept them in prison anyway. And so we got to the point by where 1808, the military said, "We've had enough. We'll overthrow him." And then Bligh was put in, I think he was in house arrest for 2 years because they didn't have planes. It was all by sea and by sail. It took 2 years for a replacement to be sent back because word's got to get from Australia to Britain. Then the government has to decide in Britain, and then they're going to send someone back to us. It's a year each way. Yeah. So then Governor MacArthur, I think MacArthur or Macquarie, one of the two, and then he turns up 2 years later. But he's had the 2 years where Australia was run by a soldier who had fought against the Americans.
But he liberated the thing.
But he liberated Australia.
I think before we go too far, as we're finishing up, I think as someone with an Irish heritage background, I think we sort of forget that the settlement of Australia wasn't necessarily a good thing for everyone who was coming to Australia either. Because you remember, ancestors were taken for stupid fucking crimes and brought to a country where there was where they were told there was nothing and you had to make it. And then you were still a prisoner, and it wasn't a good time for anyone who was originally brought here either. So I think there's a fair argument to be made for people who are from that population to be like, well, maybe January 26th isn't a great idea for us either. So
I like the Rum Rebellion. I'm going to tell you right now. Yeah. I like Rum Rebellion. I think that is a phenomenal day to celebrate as far as being an Australian, whether you're Aboriginal or you're European.
Well, no one knows about it, so yeah, that's the other thing.
Yeah. I just think that
I feel like I need to go and sit. I feel like I need to go and sit down and write an article now on January 26th, and the history of it, and then the Rum Rebellion, because it's not really taught. Like, I only learnt about it doing legal history at university.
Yeah, and I learnt about it from a meme about 5 years ago. Yeah,
I'm a weird American that's like just looks up stuff like that, but. It's because I know that most British soldiers eventually said, I don't fucking care. I don't fucking care if America is part of Britain or not. Like, why am I losing my last name? We have the same, we look the same. Why are we even mad at each other? And so, and in Australia, I just consider our brother, our sister, like we are the same. We're both governed by Britain, founded by Britain with a British flag, and told that we are supposed to salute thousands of miles away. And representation in parliament or not, or whatever, that's not your home. You come from Ireland. My people came from Scotland. They would never consider themselves British, but they were just governed by British flag. And so, I think the Rum Rebellion is super cool. And I think that, like I said, I think that generations today of an Aboriginal group could say, probably better than it could have been. And then what's to say? Again, I'm all for federal holidays. So what's to say you can't have an Aboriginal day? Why can't white people celebrate Aborigines?
Yeah, we do, and we've made a conscious effort to do that as well, which is
kind of. We have NAIDOC week, but it's not really a holiday per se.
Oh,
make it a holiday, and then you don't even have to have this conversation again.
NAIDOC week is basically been a stopgap measure to appease the Indigenous by teaching school kids, mainly primary school kids, about Indigenous heritage, National Australian Indigenous Day of celebration.
That's cool.
but it's mostly the same to school kids. There's not been a massive federal effort. You had
There's
the National
fair,
Sorry Day,
yeah,
but that's not
we've
a
also
holiday
got
either.
a lot of organisations get behind NAIDOC Week, so
Yes.
it may not necessarily be specific government action, but places like the AFL, yes, but there is, and it's growing, and recognition gets bigger and bigger every year, which is good. We should have.
Well, that's
should
good.
have it
I mean, that's
obviously,
just like I just think it's funny that like in America, I always tell the story of Thanksgiving because in second grade they like to tell you, oh, they like to make it sound like all this happened within like 2 weeks. Columbus coming, meeting the Indians, and then the Indians and Columbus becoming friends, and they're so close now that they share a meal, and then I'm always like, yeah, and then Columbus and his friends loved it so much that he invited more of his friends over, and they brought blankets.
We
had the same thing here.
Yeah. Some of the stories about what they did here.
The indigenous population here was almost completely destroyed by diseases as well. So we had the same problem here.
And so, but I think to just recognize, as a kid, I learned how different Indian cultures from all over the country build houses, what they ate, what they, and I still to this day, I'm like Iroquois, they had the longhouse. You know what I mean? I just know that. And so just like if you go to New Mexico ever, I went to the Pueblos. There's still Native Americans that live in these houses, right? That's where they live. But I went and I toured them and I ate in their home. They served me on a paper plate, just like what they would feed their family. And we paid money for it or whatever, but it was pretty cool. I'll never forget that experience as long as I live. But we're just sitting basically on the ground and we paid a few dollars for them to serve us what they would eat and we ate it. And that's cool. I think most countries, you should celebrate that. There's nothing wrong with that, and I think those people should be in the forefront. Not necessarily in the forefront, but they should be celebrated. They were here before us.
Forefront's important,
Right. We came over and we literally shot their buffalo from a train car for sport, and we nearly wiped them out with culture. I mean, just we did terrible things to them. So if we can just remember their basic culture, their basic stuff, their food, their prayers, watch their ceremonies, their rain, and pay them money to experience that. To me, that is the best way we can give back. You can celebrate them for a day, however you want, but the main thing is, how do you support them in their culture today? And the best thing is for white people to go and watch them. They dance. I've seen it in Louisiana, just right here. We have the Coshada tribe, and they have their seasonal dances and things, and you can go and go watch them. And they have their handmade leather goods. They have their stuff that they sell, and necklaces, jewelry, all that stuff. And you buy it, and that's how the best that you can. And honestly, that's what they need. They don't care about some national day of remembrance. That doesn't do anything for them. You come into their thing and letting you explain their history and show you their culture. That's the best thing you can do. So January 26th doesn't really fucking matter. Y'all should celebrate rum.
You rum instead. I like it. I like that. Rum instead.
It's a good place to finish on, I feel like. Talking about alcohol and literally almost whiskey and tea.
Amen.
Which is into your podcast. Anything you want to plug before we finish up?
The host of Whiskey and Tea. I am moving. I am moving from Louisiana to Austin, Texas. I have a 3-week window, and so I am so looking forward to my first episode out of Austin. I already have a space. I have time. I'm so excited. But until then, I will just be a guest on my favorite podcast network. February 21st, so be looking out for the beginning of March for Whiskey and Tea to come back on its weekly basis. and I have an arrangement with the Texas LP, MC specifically, the Mises Caucus. So we will be talking to them about growth, expansion, and getting our beautiful message out before the elections of May and April and May. So yeah, so I am CD McRae, Lady Cap on Twitter. Y'all come follow me. It's a fun ride, I promise. And Whiskey and Tea podcast on all your podcatchers, YouTube, Odyssey, and I look forward to be able to get back to my weekly basis as soon as possible.
Thank you, and welcome back.
Thank you.